Who's ready for 49ers Broncos? I certainly am. Got the blazer on. Going to head down to Levi's Stadium here in just a little bit. But I know that these later games, people get antsy during the day. They're excited for 49ers football, even if it is the preseason. It's a really good chance you get to see all four 49ers quarterbacks in action tonight. So why not sit down in front of the camera, talk a little bit about what we expect to see in 49ers Broncos tonight, starting with the quarterback situation, because Brock Purdy might play a series. He might play two series. He might play no series for all that we know. But Kyle Shanahan has said that there is a chance that Brock Purdy plays. And I'm just looking at history right now. History tells us that second preseason game is when QBs return. Now, I just discussed this when I was out on my run a little bit earlier. The returns from major injuries for 49ers quarterbacks under Kyle Shanahan, their first start back so far, all three have been ugly. I'm going back to Jimmy Garoppolo against the Broncos, actually, in 2019. That was the preseason week 2 in Denver. Garoppolo played a couple series, looked terrible, but then he looked a lot better the following week at Kansas City, and that got the 2019 season off to a good start. You can go to Jimmy Garoppolo last season, regular season, against the Broncos, again, in Denver, coming off the shoulder surgery, his first start. Didn't look good at all, right? That was the ugly game with a baseball score. I think it was like 11-10. The Broncos ended up winning. Garoppolo had the safety where he stepped out of the back of the end zone. It saved him for a pick six. I mean, it was ugly, but he got a lot better after that. And then last week, Trey Lance, first game off of the ankle injury. He did not look good against the Raiders. In all three cases, it looked like psychologically 49ers quarterbacks, Garoppolo twice, Lance once, coming off the ankle, didn't look like they were their usual selves. And I know that we don't have a big sample size on Trey Lance, but to me, it looked like his decisiveness had regressed last week. And it makes sense. You're trying to overcome a hurdle in your mind in that first game back with live contact. Practice won't give you live contact as a quarterback. They're not allowed to touch you. So that's what the case will be for Brock Purdy tonight if he does indeed play for those two series to start the game. And by extension, Trey Lance, he has that first game behind him after the season-ending injury. So I would expect Trey Lance might look significantly better in this game today than he did last week against the Raiders. And I think there's a whole lot of pressure on Trey because he's in a position where he obviously needs reps. He obviously needs to get the comfort level of the game down to be able to take the mechanical improvement he made and turn it into habit within the context of Shanahan's offense. He looked like an uncomfortable quarterback last week, and maybe it was because it was the first game coming off of injury. But regardless of that, just in the bigger picture, this guy has 4 career starts at the NFL level. So Trey Lance just needs more reps. The 49ers aren't in position to give him those kinds of reps during regular season play because Brock Purdy has emerged and they're trying to win a Super Bowl. So that means that Trey Lance's opportunity for those reps comes in these preseason games. He had a big opportunity, a whole half worth of opportunity last week in Las Vegas. He's going to have another chance here in the second half today against Denver, and he'll have a final preseason chance next Friday at Levi's Stadium against the Chargers. So this is important for Trey Lance because once it turns into Brock Purdy's show, and that's what the regular season is going to be about, barring an injury, Trey's not going to be able to get onto that field very often or at all. So during these preseason games, he's got to make the most of them. He absolutely does. That's why I say that the pressure is on. Last week, there's reason to believe, looking at the history of Garoppolo coming off of serious injuries, look at the history really of any quarterback coming off of a serious injury, there's reason to believe that Trey Lance was dealing with at least some sort of rust, some sort of psychological barrier that happens in that first game coming off of the injury. That being said, he has to conquer that. And that has to have been conquered by this point because he has such limited time for developmental runway this preseason. And a test against the Broncos' second and third stringers in that second half is next up for Trey Lance. A little quick take of a look at food here. This is the Boys Deli. You guys know I love to sample the food around San Francisco. I got the San Francisco sandwich yesterday at the Boys Deli. This is in Russian Hill. I was talking to my guy Carlos, who works there, big Niners fan, went to Galileo. And I mean, he was talking about the channel yesterday, and I just grabbed a video of one of the sandwiches. This is my Lunch with Lombardi recommendation for today. The Boys Deli, Russian Hill. It's over there at Polk and Vallejo. That is Dutch Crunch, by the way. Bay Area famous Dutch crunch. Turkey, avocado, I think some bacon on this one. They've got this amazing remoulade at the Boys Deli. So check it out. I want to go through a 49ers roster overview right now because I think that's the best way to prepare for a preseason game. You have to see all 90 to really contextualize what the 49ers might do. So we can go through this position by position, really talk about what we expect to see everywhere. Why don't we start down at the bottom with the specialists today? I'm going to highlight each position, then I'm going to make the camera a little bit bigger so I could connect with you, the audience. But today at kicker, you're going to see both Zane Gonzalez and Jake Moody. Last week, the 49ers planned to showcase both of their kickers as well, but Jake Moody missed his first kick, the 40-yarder, and Kyle Shanahan wanted him feeling better leaving the game, so he gave him the second opportunity, which was a 58-yarder, and that meant that Zane Gonzalez couldn't have that second opportunity, and then Jake Moody got iced on both of his kicks, and he missed both of his kicks. So Zane definitely needs to kick during a game for a couple different reasons. One, he is insurance for the 49ers in case Jake Moody gets the yips and can't make a field goal in a game. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but the 49ers have had to cover their asses for any contingency in this situation because moving to a rookie kicker can be dangerous. But, more likely Jake Moody's going to be fine, but you still want Zane Gonzalez to showcase his kicking abilities in an actual game so that you can trade him away. Zane Gonzalez is either insurance or he's an asset. Both things are good for the 49ers, which is why he's on the roster. We don't know for sure whether he's going to be insurance the 49ers need to use, if that's a policy they're going to need to activate, or if he's going to be an asset they can trade away. And that's why the 49ers are intent on getting both kickers, Zane Gonzalez and Jake Moody, some game action in the matchup with Denver tonight. All right, moving forward, let's go to the secondary. How about we talk about the safeties and the cornerbacks separately? I think that's the way to do it because there's going to be a lot of permutations in that defensive backfield to track tonight. So I've highlighted the safeties here for you. Hufanga, Tashawn Gibson. If the 49ers decide to go starters today across the board for 2 series, then you'll see both of these guys. I'm not so sure they'll be starters across the board. It might just be first team offensive line and Brock Purdy, but we'll see. Next week is the dress rehearsal where I think we'll see essentially everyone. Maybe guys like Trent Williams get the day off because it's Trent Williams. But assuming that Hufanga and Gibson play only sparingly or not at all, then today I'm really keeping a close eye on Jair Brown because I thought he had a nice debut for the 49ers last week. Jair, you look at his propensity to hit people. He's big, he's strong, he wants contact. He's the type of player that you absolutely like to see in pads in a live contact situation. And I think that's what the 49ers saw when they drafted him out of Penn State. They saw somebody with really good instincts down near the box. And from the very first drive last week against the Raiders, we saw Jair Brown show off those instincts. Came crashing down from his high safety position to make the tackle on Zamir White. That was a touchdown saver near the pylon. It's a play that you have to sniff out. And Jair Brown sniffed it out. We know that he's got good ball instincts through practice, through all the interceptions. He had the 10 interceptions over the past 2 seasons in college. He was the only draft-eligible player who was able to do that, 10 interceptions over the past 2 seasons of college football. So, this guy on paper and on his college tape and on his practice resume so far has shown to be a well-rounded package. I'm really looking forward to him trying to translate that into real game action during the regular season. But the next stepping stone for Jair Brown is here against the Broncos in week 2. And I think he's going to have a big role tonight. I think Steve Wilkes last week was not too happy with the 49ers secondary and their safeties in particular in some of the coverage discipline on the back end. Aiden O'Connell had a big game for the Raiders. I know that Jair Brown had a few nice run stops, but I don't think that the secondary as a whole really pleased the 49ers defensive coordinator as far as the cohesion, the reading of keys, the discipline needed on the back end. And that's to be understood because Jair Brown is a rookie, and he didn't single out Jair specifically, for anything negative, but I just think that the entire unit on the back end needs to work well in cohesion. And I don't think there's any worry that Talanoa Hufanga and Tashawn Gibson will work well in cohesion once the 49ers first team. But Jair Brown is gunning to play a lot as a third safety. So he's going to have to be on top of his P's and Q's at an NFL level. Miles Hartsfield's going to be playing with him tonight. Hartsfield is essentially a coach on the field for the 49ers. It's somebody that Steve Wilks made sure the team signed, played under Wilks at Carolina, student of the game kind of player. So Hartsfield can help Jair Brown. Quantrez Knight is a player the 49ers really like, who's really versatile, can play the nickel spots, the corner spots, but currently is at safety. And Taylor Hawkins, he's a former corner out of San Diego State who is now playing safety for the 49ers. I think he's downsized his body a little bit to be able to fly around a lot. He put on some muscle and some weight after switching from corner to safety for the 49ers last year, but now he's cut some of that weight, and he was really good. I mean, he was a missile in run support last week. So look out for Taylor Hawkins, look out for Quantrez Knight, but that Hawkins-Jair Brown combination, we might see it today at safety as we move into the second, third, and fourth quarters. And those are two players the 49ers really like. They obviously like Jair Brown because they drafted him, but don't overlook Taylor Hawkins because they've had him on the practice squad for a year. They decided to bring him back this season, reworked his body, and Steve Wilks went out and really complimented Taylor Hawkins after the game against the Raiders. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a viewing guide at safety. I think as a group, they do need to be better in coverage as far as what I just talked about, that discipline. But as individuals, two of these guys last week were already flying around making big plays. Jair Brown and Taylor Hawkins were making some big plays that popped off the screen. So the 49ers hope to see more of that this evening at Levi's Stadium. All right, we'll go into the cornerback position, highlighting them as well. Charvarius Ward, Deommodore Lenoir, Isaiah Oliver, your starters. My question is, I think we for sure see Isaiah Oliver because he's not a guaranteed starter, and the 49ers have been very open about that. But do we see the actual starters, or at least Deommodore Lenoir? Because now they're tinkering with Lenoir at nickelback in situations where they need better coverage skills than Isaiah Oliver. And if they move Deommodore Lenoir into nickel, somebody else has to play outside corner in those packages, and that might be Ambry Thomas. It might be Samuel Womack. Regardless, the 49ers are approaching the regular season, so the chances that we see some of these frontline players grow week by week in the preseason. And there are so many potential permutations of how they run things in this secondary that I think today Steve Wilks might want to throw a lot of these guys out there just so he can experiment and tinker with how he wants to run these personnel packages during games. You can do so many things. So I'm going to keep this open right now so you could kind of visualize what the 49ers are doing. But Isaiah Oliver is your big nickel, bigger body, better against the run than against, shiftier slot receivers. So if you have a shiftier slot receiver, you can move Deommodore Lenoir over into this nickel spot. You can move Ambry Thomas into Lenoir's spot. You can also run a 3-safety set instead of bringing a nickel on at all. That means Jair Brown's coming in. Ambry Thomas or Samuel Womack are two of the players that make this possible for the 49ers, right? Because if they can hold down an outside corner spot, they can allow Deommodore Lenoir to kick inside. And then you got the whole wild card of Deshaun Jameson, the undrafted rookie out of Texas who can play outside or inside as well. That's before we even get to Darrell Luter Jr., who's currently on PUP. So we're not going to see him. I doubt we see him this preseason. I think he stays on PUP to give the 49ers roster flexibility at the cut down. But you look at a guy like Darrell Luter Jr., he might also be an inside-outside player. A.J. Parker, who's a player I do think you should keep an eye on today. He was good in coverage for the 49ers last week against the Raiders. He's going to get nickel snaps as well. And A.J. Parker might be a dark horse for the 49ers at that nickel whack position. I think it's really important to look at slot cornerback when you're watching these games and you see all these bodies rotating through because it's the preseason. Look at slot cornerback in terms of matchups, in terms of what the 49ers are trying to do on the defensive side of the football. Are they trying to stop the run? Are they trying to take on a big slot? Look at the slot receiver for the other team, the opposing offense when the Broncos line up today. Are they running a tight end out there? They're running a bigger bodied receiver out there? Or are they going to go more to the shiftier, smaller guy? How the 49ers going to counter that? Is the bigger guy going to be somebody that Isaiah Oliver comes into the game to take on? Or, if you see a shiftier guy on the other side, are you going to see them go to the 49ers go to Deshaun Jameson? Are you going to see them go to Diamond Lenore in the slot? I don't know who's going to play and who's not at the very top of this lineup. But Deshaun Jameson's not at the top of the lineup yet, and he definitely will play. I think Isaiah Oliver definitely will play because he hasn't secured a spot at the top of the lineup. And to me, how Steve Wilks mixes and matches his pieces in that secondary is going to be absolutely intriguing. All right, moving on to linebacker. This is where the 49ers have a surplus. We're not going to see Greenlaw. We're not going to see Burks. Probably not going to see Warner. I think linebacker is the one position where even if you're trying to play some starters, why bother? Just because you're trying to see as much as you can out of some of these young guys so you can determine who makes the team and who doesn't. I mean, D. Winters and Jalen Graham were flying around last week. So was Marcelino McCrary-Ball. You're not going to be able to go sideline to sideline against this 49ers team, assuming at least some of these linebackers stay healthy. I mean, there is some serious speed in the room. Curtis Robinson was making plays this week. He had an interception of Brock Purdy, almost had a second interception of Brock Purdy on the same day. Demetrius Flanagan-Foles, he's really good on special teams. Can't discount him. He's been with the 49ers for a long time now. And at the bottom of the room, you have Kiaba Tizino, who was a USFL tackle leader kind of guy. Actually was teammates on the Pittsburgh Maulers with Reuben Foster. Reuben Foster was his co-linebacker, and I believe they won it all, right, in the USFL. And I think that Tizino was the defensive MVP there in the playoffs or in the championship game. So I mean, it just gives you an idea that this linebacker room for the 49ers is absolutely loaded. I can't wait to see more of Winters, who's got great instincts. I can't wait to see more of Graham, former cover guy in college who looks like he could be a good cover guy in the NFL. He's got the height of Fred Warner. D. Winters, probably more of a Greenlaw type with anticipation, a little bit shorter. Both of these guys, though, can flat out fly. Both of these guys have DB backgrounds. That's what the 49ers love at linebacker. They can cover. They can go sideline to sideline. This is, hands down, the best linebacker room in the National Football League. So enjoy the depth today. Just sit back and enjoy watching these 49ers linebackers work. I'll tell you, last week, even though the team as a whole, they weren't running their best guys out there, the 49ers linebackers popped off the tape. They really popped off the tape with that sideline-to-sideline speed. So this is absolutely worth watching in the game today. All right, defensive line for the 49ers here against the Broncos. Bosa, Armstead, Hargrave, Jackson. Obviously, you don't have Bosa. Obviously, I mean, you don't care about what Armstead and Hargrave do in this game. You probably don't have Drake Jackson. I should probably shade him in pink until he's actually back at practice. He's been back at practice with pads on, but he hasn't participated in team drills. So I find it hard to believe they'd toss him into game activity right now. That, since you've got two defensive ends here at the very top of the depth chart shaded in different colors, that means they're not available. That means the 49ers have really had to dig deep into reserve depth. And that's why they've made a couple signings. I don't know what the corresponding moves are going to be for the 49ers, but they signed a couple of defensive linemen yesterday. They signed Ladarius Hamilton, who I'm going to put on this roster as soon as I know who the 49ers are cutting to make room for him. And they signed Tomasi Laulile, who's a defensive tackle. And I can put Tomasi's name right now because I do have room in the defensive tackle room. So we'll put Tomasi Laulile in there. He's a fast defensive tackle, XFL guy who really showed off his speed in the XFL season not too long ago. The 49ers had around in 2022, last year, in the offseason, but obviously didn't make the team. So the 49ers are trying to bolster the defensive line. I know that Javon Kinlaw wasn't at practice the other day. We'll see what the reason for that was. I just want to see who can stick with either this 53-man roster or the 90-man roster that Chris Kasarik might be able to develop into a contributor over the course of the 2023 season. We know Cleveland Farrell's a lock. We know Austin Bryant's on his way to making the team. Kevin Givens has been a stalwart for the 49ers as a depth piece inside. Marlon Davidson is really impressing them at defensive tackle, former second-round pick out of Alabama, number 62. Keep an eye out on him today. And then, I'm curious, Kerry Hyder Jr. played tackle last year for the 49ers, playing essentially edge this year because of the thinness along the edge. They've been deeper along defensive tackle. I'm curious what Kerry Hyder Jr. is going to bring this team this year. The numbers haven't been as big as they were in 2020 when he had those 8.5 sacks, but he's a technician. He's somebody that can play inside and out. And in times like this, when you're trying to bridge a gap before a a lot of your bigger names come back, Gary Hyder Jr. is valuable. Intrigue today, Robert Beal. How's he going to do for the 49ers? 5th-round pick out of Georgia, has the great explosiveness off the line. He should have a nice opportunity. Breeland Speaks, another higher draft pick in the past out of Tennessee. How's he going to be for the 49ers after a week in the system? Is Tomasi Laulile going to play right away? Is Ladarius Hamilton going to play right away at the edge? Alex Barrett has impressed this training camp. And then there's Taco Charlton. It's not Tuesday, but Taco Charlton has a chance to show out today on Saturday. He has impressed the 49ers so far in practice. There's just a lot of moldable clay to work with if you're Chris Kasarik. Not a lot of star power right now with Bosa not in the building. I know Drake Jackson not quite a star yet, but if he doesn't play, then that's name recognition. I don't think the frontliners are going to get much time today. But watching those D linemen work for the 49ers today, I mean, this is the training grounds right now, right? These are the dog days for the 49ers defensive line. They're trying to round out a nice 53-man roster with 9 or 10 bodies. And then the practice squad, I mean, those are coveted spots. To be on the 49ers practice squad as a defensive lineman, you're a call away from being on that active roster. And when you're with the rest of the Sharks, you can swarm and you can eat, right? That's what our friend Baldy says, Brian Baldinger, that 49ers defensive line, they like to feast. There are a bunch of Sharks out there. Even the 8th and 9th bodies on that roster can go off for a big game at any time because so much attention is going to be directed at players like Nick Bosa and Javon Hargrave. All right, we're moving on to the offensive side of the football. Highlighting it, offensive line. So who do we see out of the starters today? Anybody? They want Colton McKivitz to get a little bit of time. I think if Brock Purdy plays, which I think it's leaning toward that, I think that you absolutely put that first-team offensive line in front of him, at least for a possession or two. Kyle Shanahan talked about the danger of having the second and third-team offensive line in front of quarterbacks last week, so I don't think you put your starter in that kind of situation. And we saw it last week. I mean, the 49ers second-team offensive line is not there to be the offensive line during the regular season. You're just trying to find a body or 2 or 3 from that group to be able to have on the 53-man roster as depth. So I don't know if we see Trent, but I'm almost sure if we see Brock Purdy, we'll see the rest of these starters for at least a little bit of time. But it will quickly move to the backups for the 49ers. And I'll tell you what, this is a really, really big day for some of those reserve offensive linemen because there's going to be a dogfight to make this roster. Teams around the NFL are struggling with offensive line depth. I don't think there's a single team in the National Football League that's not worried about O-line depth. It's just the proliferation of edge rushing and even defensive tackle talent. I mean, Aaron Donald set a tone in this league where you've got such athletic D linemen who have consistently had the upper hand over O-linemen, especially reserve O-linemen over the past few years. People always ask me, David, why aren't the 49ers bringing in a good O-lineman for a cup of coffee? And I say, do you think they're just good old linemen sitting around on the street? Every single team in the NFL is desperate for offensive line depth. So the only way forward is to develop the offensive line depth if you're the 49ers. You can't just sign guys and expect them to be good. Those guys are already on football teams. So players like Jalen Moore, who he was really bad last week, gave up 3 pressures and 12 pass blocking snaps. Players like Nick Zakelj, who fared a little bit better, but not much better, got backed into Trey Lance on that first snap. Those guys, I mean, this is a huge game. This is a huge opportunity for those guys to show more comfort, more progress. I thought Leroy Watson acquitted himself well last week, but he's got to continue making strides forward. So did Jason Poe. Guys like Moore and Zakelj, they're threatened by Watson and Poe, who played better last week, maybe against slightly worse competition later in the game, but everybody is going to be pushing for some of these depth spots. That includes Ilm Manning, who might be the biggest 49ers revelation so far of training camp. You need, when the roster is constricted and you don't have room to carry all the players that you want to carry, you need players who are versatile. And along the offensive line, Ilm Manning, the 49ers see him as a guard because he's only 6'2", 32 and 5/8 inch arms, but he's played exclusively tackle in this offseason. The 49ers keep waiting to move him to guard once he fails a tackle because he doesn't have long enough arms. But he hasn't failed yet. He might have been their best pass blocker against the Raiders last week. So where does Ilm Manning fit in this competition? I think he projects really well at this point to at least make it to the practice squad because of his versatility. How are the 49ers going to do backup center? Because John Feliciano, the veteran, is a lock. Keith Ismail, he's struggled a bit, especially with some of the snaps in training camp. Are the 49ers just going to go with two centers, Feliciano and Brendel, on the 53? I think so. But somebody like Ismail can continue to develop on the practice squad. Somebody like Joey Fisher, I think he is on a good track to earn a practice squad spot because he had a decent first showing against the Raiders. Although, Fisher came from such a small school that the technique and reversions to old form have still been a little bit of an issue. But he was the strongest offensive lineman that was who was draft eligible last year. So, all of these players are intriguing in one way or the other for the 49ers, but most of them are still very raw. And there are limited spots, and the 49ers are desperate to be deeper than they currently are to defend on the offensive line. And, maybe they could pull some kind of trade before or at the cut down for a swing tackle. Maybe the swing tackle's not on the roster. Maybe it will end up being Matt Pryor, who looks like he's in better shape now than he was at the start of training camp. We'll see if Matt Pryor can also deliver at left tackle. Watch that today. See if 75 Matt Pryor is only at right tackle or if he's at left tackle. If Matt Pryor can play both sides, big arrow up for him to be the 49ers swing tackle. But anyway, you got all these guys fighting for limited spots, and maybe the 49ers will have to go for outside help to bolster that offensive line enough, but you can't really count on it. If you're the 49ers, you're just like every other team in the NFL. You're desperate for offensive line depth. You need it because you played 20 games in each of the past 2 seasons and guys have gotten hurt. To survive the marathon, you need bodies, and the 49ers are looking to develop bodies. The only way forward along the offensive line is development, and guess what? Today's a big chance at development for the 49ers offensive line. There are a lot of names here who are going to be on the field today who are going to be fighting for their NFL careers. They're going to be fighting for a spot with a really good roster in this season. There may only be 8 offensive line spots. There might end up being 9. That's still too few to carry all of these players. So watch today with rapt interest because it's going to be fun, I think, to track how the blockers do up front for the 49ers. All right, tight end. Cam Latu's got to be a whole lot better. He's got to catch some footballs today. He can't fumble. Last week, I thought the 49ers saw reliability from Ross Dwelly. They saw reliability from Troy Fumagalli. I thought Braden Willis, toward the end of the game, when he came in, he showed to be reliable. The only tight end who really hasn't been reliable has been their highest pick, the 3rd-round pick, Cameron Latu. He had similar issues at Alabama when they first converted him from defensive end a couple years ago. But Latu's got to get it together because the 49ers, again, you see the roster that I put up there. There's limited space on this roster. You can't just carry 3rd-round picks because they're 3rd-round picks. They've got to show you something. And Latu was a potential pick all along. They knew that it would take him a little while to blossom. But even then, that blossoming or some of it has to start to occur before the cut down because the 49ers need to know that they're not wasting a roster spot, a valuable roster spot in a win now season on somebody who's not going to be ready until next year. That contribution doesn't have to happen in week 1, but the contributions from anybody who makes the initial 53-man roster have to have a chance to happen at some point this season. So it's a huge day for Cameron Latu, who's been really struggling with the drops. I talked about the one in the end zone the other day, and he kicked the pylon after. He's frustrated. He's probably swimming in the playbook, but he's got to take that next step. Life is not easy in the NFL. It's a cutthroat league. It waits around for nobody. So it's a huge day for Cameron Latu to show that he can show some dependability at that tight end position. All right, wide receiver. So obviously you've got Ayuk, you got Samuel, you got Jennings at the top. There's no question about any of those 3 guys. The 49ers are going to continue to run their returner audition where I thought Ronnie Bell impressed them last week. Deshaun Jameson impressed them last week. We'll see if we see much of Danny Gray, who was sore last week, so he didn't play. Ray McLeod is obviously hurt right now, so that might open up another spot in the 49ers receiving room at the cut-down deadline, but we'll see how they ended up playing all of that. I'm excited to see Ronnie Bell. I thought he was one of the big revelations of the 49ers preseason opener. I mean, if you looked at how Ronnie played, there were yards after the catch. It wasn't just like he was some kind of finesse guy who hasn't seen an NFL weight room yet. He took the jet sweep and he started plowing through and spinning around people. I mean, yards after contact were big for Ronnie Bell last week, which to me shows that he can be a versatile chess piece in Kyle Shanahan's offense. And then he can be a versatile chess piece within the context of the whole team because he could return as well. So Ronnie Bell put himself into that 53-man roster projection for me last week with his play. Does anybody else do that? Because I think the 49ers have a lot of capable bodies who are currently on the outside looking into the picture. Tay Martin's had a really good camp. Chris Conley has had especially good rapport with Trey Lance. And one thing about Chris Conley is he's 30, he's a burner, but he's a really damn good run blocker. It's one reason why Kyle Shanahan signed him. He's a really good run blocker. And Willie Snead, I mean, he's impressed the 49ers. He's made circus catches. He's a good special teams piece. He already contributed for this team last year. I mean, all three of these guys could help the 49ers on any given Sunday. And then you've got a player like Isaiah Winstead, who also is making some noise, and he'd be the tallest 49ers receiver, currently is, but if he made the 53-man roster at any point, at 6'3", Isaiah Winstead would tower over the rest of these guys, and maybe they do want a target like that. For now, probably just a practice squad candidate, but somebody worth watching. So is Daz Newsome, although I think the Daz has done the least out of this entire group. So don't expect to see many of the top frontliners today for the 49ers, but absolutely do find yourself intrigued with a combination of youth like Tay Martin and veterans like Chris Conley, who are fighting for a spot on that 53 and might not be favored to make the 53, but have been delivering good contributions for the 49ers. They need these guys to continue building rapport with all of the quarterbacks, and we'll probably see all of the quarterbacks for the 49ers today. All right. Going off to the running backs. What are we going to see here today? McCaffrey? No, I doubt it. Juszczyk? No, I doubt it. Great opportunity for Coletto. I want to see more LeBourne in the preseason. Kalon LeBourne. There's a chance he only got one carry last week. The chance the 49ers like Kalon LeBourne so much that they're just hiding him now, that they're going to say, okay, hey, we want him on the practice squad. We want to expose him to the rest of the league so nobody picks him up off waivers. But yeah, I don't think that you're risking all too much. I mean, teams don't usually have a lot of room on their rosters to poach running backs off of the waiver wires of other teams. So maybe we see more Kalon LeBourne this week. If you do watch him, he's number 36. He's built low to the ground. I call him a cannonball because I've seen him on a couple draw plays in training camp just shoot out of a cannon. His 0 to 60 for his body type is really, really impressive to me. So I think they really like LeBourne. I think they want to see better pass protection out of somebody like Ty Davis-Price. Not sure where exactly Mitchell is right now. They expected him back at some point this week, but I don't know if they want Elijah Mitchell in game action because whenever Elijah Mitchell's healthy, he's already proven himself. I think it's more of a battle between Davis-Price and Jordan Mason for who's going to be the top depth piece between those two because there's a lot of similarities between Davis-Price and Jordan Mason, right? They're both built like 220-pound bell cows. Both solid frames, both guys that you can run as a closer, finisher, whatever you want to call it, power back. So the pass protection is going to be really important for both. How do they pick up blitzes? How do they take on opposing linebackers? I mean, I think one of the hardest things in the sport of football is to be a running back and to take on a hard-charging linebacker. And for Davis-Price and for Jordan Mason, they've got the inherent advantage of weighing about as much as opposing linebackers. But a lot of times you'll have a 200-pound running back having to take on a 230-pound linebacker. The running back is the one who's having to dig in his heels, and the linebacker is the one with the head of steam. And it's not easy. It's painful. It's tough. It's nerve-wracking because if you fail in that pass protection assignment, your quarterback can get decapitated. I mean, but it's a big duty, right? It's a really big duty. And I know that some people weren't very happy with Ty Davis-Price's run block, pass protection last week. So the 49ers need that to be better. They need Mason to be better. Jordan Mason dropped the screen pass from Trey Lance last week. Catching is so important. The receiving game is so important for 49ers running backs. It's going to be a fun day out at the office today watching these guys get after it to try to establish a fair pecking order behind Christian McCaffrey and obviously the fullback Kyle Juszczyk. I call that the Stanford-Harvard starting backfield for the 49ers. All right, finally, quarterback position. Brock Purdy's going to be out there in all likelihood today. Why don't we hear from Brock Purdy in his interview with Peter King?
Think of having a full season, an off season of preparedness, and then playing theoretically for a full year. How do you feel about that? What do you think you're going to be able to show this year?
Yeah, I feel like, just being able to take the next step in situational football. Obviously I showed that I can go in and manage the offense and, put a drive together, put up points on the board, win games. And so for myself, it's like, how can I be the best in certain situations of football? Going back to last year, watching some moments where it's like, hey, man, you got to clean this up. You got to be smart and get the ball to the right guys on time. Check the ball down, throw the ball away, and grow. I feel like in those kind of areas. And so I feel like that's the next step for me. But at the same time, it's like, man, how can we win games, do it consistently, and push this offense and team to be the best versions of ourselves. And if we can do that, the sky's the limit.
So that's Brock Purdy. Maybe we see him for a couple series today. I would not be alarmed if Brock Purdy looks rusty, if he doesn't look great today, because, well, every single 49ers quarterback that has come off of a major injury in his first start hasn't looked good under Kyle Shanahan. You can go back to Garoppolo, 2019, coming off the ACL against the Broncos, coincidentally. Not good. Garoppolo last year, starting against the Broncos, coming off the shoulder injury, not good. Lance last week, coming off the ankle injury against the Raiders, not good. It's a psychological thing. You've got to get used to the fact that guys can hit you again. And that is not the easiest thing in the world when you're coming off of a major injury. Along that note, though, Trey Lance, I would think, would look significantly better today. He gets to play against worse defenders, and he's got that first experience post-injury past him. It's behind him. It's under his belt. He's ready to go moving forward. And there's a lot of pressure on Lance. He does have to look better today because he's got limited reps to make the improvements that he needs to make, with Brock Purdy now being the main man for the 49ers under center. And don't forget, the majority of action today will probably go to Sam Darnold, who was good last week. See if Darnold can keep it up. They're going to flip-flop Lance and Darnold. Last week it was Lance in the first half, Darnold in the second. This week it's going to be Darnold in the first half and Lance in the second, with Brock Purdy potentially playing a series or two to start this football game. How much Brandon Allen do we see? QB number 4 over here? I don't know. But he played cleanup duty for the 49ers last week, so that was good for them. He played well, too. I thought Allen and Darnold were the two good 49ers quarterbacks last week. Lance played very poorly. They would like to see all 4 play well. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if it's Purdy, shaky, and then Darnold, Lance, and Allen playing well today, just because of the injury recovery timelines and statuses, and Brock Purdy seeing his first action since the elbow injury today. But that is the 49ers roster overview here in the 49ers Broncos preview. Happy to answer a few questions, and then I'm going to head to Levi's. Should be a fun one today. My God, 260 comments. It's a lot. Have we hit 42,000 yet? I wonder. I want to look. Toss your questions into the chat section, and we'll go from there. I'm checking to see if we've hit 42,000 yet, because we were like 10 short when I started. 41,995. Let's go. 5 more. Hit that sub button right now. We are 5 away. With 516 people watching, it should literally take a second to hit 42,000. And you could smash the like button as well. All right. Hello from Norway. I love it. I'm looking through some of these comments. All the O-linemen that aren't starters are on the bubble right now. Everyone's on the bubble. They're fighting for those depth spots. The 49ers can't just give those away. That's what I talked about in the offensive line section of my roster breakdown. Every single offensive lineman, from Jalen Moore to Joey Fisher, all these guys got a chance because nobody is standing out. And every team is facing a similar dynamic. It's tough to find good reserve offensive linemen. My expectations for Trey Lance weren't to blow the doors off last week. I just wanted Trey Lance. If I was just looking at this through the prism of the 49ers coaching staff, I wanted him to make competent decisions last week, be competent with some of the timing. Lance did not look good last week. There's no sugarcoating it. Now, there's a reason why he might not have looked good. And there's a reason why you play 3 preseason games, not just 1. He's got a chance to look better. But if Lance looks the same as he did last week, that's not good for Lance. It's not good for the 49ers. And you just have to be honest. Purdy and Lance are both judged within the context of what they've already accomplished in the NFL. Brock Purdy, you could repeat after me. Brock Purdy has accomplished way more in the National Football League than Trey Lance has. That is a truth. If that hurts your feelings, I don't care because I care about facts and truth and not people's feelings. Brock Purdy has accomplished a lot more than Trey Lance. You could repeat that over and over and over again. So they're going to be judged within that prism, right? Brock Purdy is coming back as an established quarterback because of what he did last year, and Trey Lance is coming back from his injury. Both of these guys are coming off of season-ending injuries. Trey Lance is coming off of his injury with a lot more still to prove. Of course, both of them have stuff to prove. It's the NFL. You constantly have to prove that you're valid in the NFL. But we look at Lance through the prism of this guy's accuracy has been bad in the past. We look at Purdy through the prism of this guy's been really good in his only NFL action so far. So how can Purdy get better? How can Lance get better? Well, I know the answer for Lance. Better mechanics, better accuracy, better decisiveness. How can Purdy get better? Well, I could tell you the answer there. He needs to step up in the pocket a little bit more. He needs to be more efficient with his situational decisions of when to bail the pocket and when not to. I think that the improvements needed from both of these quarterbacks are both very different. For Purdy, they're more minute, which makes sense because he's been a lot better than Trey Lance. For Trey Lance, they're a little bit more general, but we still have pointed critiques of his play. So that's how you fairly judge the quarterback competition in an unbiased fashion. Yes, facts do hit too close to home for some. Do I agree that Marvin has to go? Who's Marvin? Amazing Turkey asks. There's no Marvin on the 49ers roster. I don't think it's panic mode unless Bosa's not in the building for week one. If he's not there to play the Steelers, then all of a sudden you're losing games, or not losing on the scoreboard, but you're losing games of Nick Bosa. And at that point, well, yeah, he's one of the best players in football, the defensive player of the year. You want the defensive player of the year on your team. I don't think any of this preseason and training camp stuff matters nearly as much as actual regular season action without Nick Bosa. Oh, Marvin's a commenter. I see. I don't follow the chat fully, so you guys need to give me a break when I see hundreds of comments coming through. I don't know who you're talking about when you're just mentioning random names. Drake Jackson hasn't been practicing in team periods for the 49ers yet, so I don't really think that he's going to be playing in this game. I wouldn't think so, but maybe he will. We'll see. I mean, the 49ers would certainly like Moody to make his field goal. I don't think he has to, but I think people would start to get a little worried if he didn't make it this week. Well, stashing a quarterback on the practice squad is not that easy. If a quarterback gets picked up by somebody else after you release him or waive him, or depending on which quarterback you cut at the roster deadline, you can only release a vested veteran. But somebody gets picked up by another team, then you can't sign him to your practice squad. You can only pay him like $250,000 for the practice squad. So somebody may offer more money. That's why we're talking about Brandon Allen potentially going elsewhere if the 49ers cut him. So they might carry 4. They probably won't. They might sign somebody else to the practice squad if they let go of Brandon Allen and he goes elsewhere. I don't know what's going to happen until the cut down day. And I encourage you to continue repeating this to yourself. It will play out organically. I've said it all off season. I've been correct so far. The 49ers QB situation will play out organically. Just hold tight for 10 more days. Cut downs on August 29th. Let this play out organically. Yeah, but most of us, Robert McAvoy says most of us about to honor our contract or get fired. It's nonsense about Bosa. Most of us don't have the leverage that Nick Bosa has over his employer. Nick Bosa is the best in the world at his job, and it's a multi-million dollar or billion-dollar industry, and the 49ers are reliant on what he brings. So if he holds out in this situation, well, yeah, if the 49ers fire him, the 49ers are shooting themselves in the foot. So holding out, it's about leverage, and different employees have different amounts of leverage over their employers. Nick Bosa has a considerable amount of leverage over the 49ers, at least enough to hold out without much punishment at all. That being said, the 49ers ultimately do have leverage for this season in terms of the money that Nick Bosa is currently owed. He's owed $17.9 million for the year, but if he doesn't show up, the 49ers don't have to pay him at all. So I don't think Nick Bosa wants to sit out all year. At some point, it's a game of chicken. At some point, when you're driving toward the other car in a game of chicken, one or both sides swerve. And that deadline, I think, is week one, because Bosa starts losing money, real money, in week one. The 49ers can't forgive fines at that point. There's not paying him game checks at that point. So it's a game of chicken. It's an ongoing game of chicken. And we'll see when that deadline hits who swerves first. All right, 49ers Broncos. It is happening in about 4 hours. I'm going to head down to Levi Stadium from San Francisco. Field tour coming up, interviews coming up, analysis coming up. Follow me on Twitter at Lombardi himself. And let me refresh the count here. 42,003. We hit 42K. So thank you, everybody. It's awesome to be able to hit some of these milestones on air. I'll put it up on the screen. We have hit 42,000 subscribers. What a journey it's been. And, it's been like 2,000 in a week. So maybe 5,000, maybe 50,000 before the season starts. Is that getting a little aggressive? I don't know. Hit the subscribe button right now. Hit the notification bell, and we'll see if we can get there together. So thank you, everybody. It's been awesome. 42,000 of you. We'll talk to you all very soon. Enjoy the game and stay tuned for more coverage.